I got a question.
Yeah.
We're only doing 2 presentations, right?
Right, yeah, you're done.
Oh.
All right, Theo, you wanna go next week? What day do you wanna do?
I don't know.
Monday.
Yeah.
All right, anybody else? All right,
Hey, yeah, don't forget to bring in the buddy bill so you can start collecting the cards.
all right, who'd like to pray for us today? Dennis is our only ever volunteer. All right, go ahead.
Yes. Lord, thank you. Thank you for this day. Thank you for the smiles on everybody's face. Thank you for giving us this morning. Lord, I just ask you to open up our hearts, our ears, and our minds to take in the information that we're about to receive from you, Thurber. Open up our hearts, soften us, Lord God, so we can utilize this information and replicate it into our everyday lives, into our future lives with our kids. Speak life over every current relationship, Lord God. Pray that you strengthen them, even the engagements in marriage, the people that are married, Lord God. I just speak life into that, breathe life into that, Lord God. That we would draw them to you and closer relationship with you. Bless Karen Thurber as she is prepared to teach us in the name of Jesus. Amen.
All right, guys, we're ready to go. Jeanette, we'll get you in a few minutes, okay? You'll be up first. All right, so we finished with talking about spanking, which you guys were more interested in that topic than any time I've taught that.
It's actually the law. You can't look people, or you can't get
Like,
kids
most
to
people
close
aren't
their
too into this. You guys were into the spanking topic.
Wait.
All right. Okay, so we were looking at those 4 different styles. We plugged in what you guys fit into. Now we're gonna move on to some other things that help determine or help, maybe it's like, it determines your parenting style, but not necessarily, maybe it's consciously, but maybe some of the unconscious things that occur in parenting style. The parent tends to parent the child either the way they were parented or the opposite. All right, so it's usually you either go in a way that's similar, you might have some similarities, a little bit of differences, but in general a similar pattern, or if you feel like it was, totally a negative thing, you generally swing the other way. All right, so that's usually in the case of if you grew up in a home where it's not done well, you go to the opposite end. There's also biological components to the parent-child relationship. So have you ever noticed that the high-pitched voice is something that's actually used in all cultures? Like when you talk to a baby, you say, "Oh, you just I don't know exactly what the biological link is to that, but it's probably just something, across cultures that maybe a baby is more responsive to the caregiver when they hear that sort of voice. And you do the baby talk thing, but you're not really supposed to do baby talk, but high-pitched voice would be really common. There's a personality component to the parenting style. So the parent's intelligence level, all right, so how smart they are, how researched they are in the area of parenting can be a helpful thing. Their attitude about it, whether they wanted to have the child in the first place, where they're at in life, how hard they're pushed with jobs, expectations, and general motivation. There's the socioeconomic component, so a higher socioeconomic status leads to the ability to offer more, so kids that are brought up in homes that are more economically stable usually have more opportunities, which could be good or bad. All right, I know that my brother, he raises his kids. they're pretty well off, I guess you could say. He coaches at Duke, so he's pretty well off. He's always been well off. So his kids have always been given a lot of activities. Like after school, they're the type that are scheduled from when school ends to bedtime. You know, tennis, swimming, all sorts of, well, now they mainly run, all sorts of things. But lots of different opportunities are made available when people have more money. Is this a good thing? What do you guys think?
No, they turn out spoiled brats.
They turn out spoiled brats. They might be more stressed too, right? Because a kid's not allowed to be a kid and have downtime. I mean, I just think about the kids that are like left at school, even here in Ellendale, till 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock. It's kind of like you've been imprisoned like an entire day. You go there, it's practically dark. You come home in the dark. You're not really allowed to be a kid outside of the boundary of school. So a lot of organized activities, I think, after school can be a negative. But it can be a positive if they're limited, I think. You know, so that the stress level of the child and the rest of the family isn't really out of balance. What do you think, Zach?
Depends on the type of family. Since I only grew up with my mother, she
Okay.
didn't have enough time to be with me if I didn't have all these activities. Because I was constantly going, constantly doing stuff.
So you would have been left alone?
Yeah, so
Right.
I would have assumed that would have negatively affected
would have
me
been a
more
negative,
so
yeah.
than constantly being busy.
Right. This is true.
And
Yeah,
it-
being by yourself alone, not much guidance, that wouldn't have been good either.
That and it's good to be involved with the community. You just can't overdo it because that's what causes people to become the spoiled, rotten child. Not the attributes of having it, but not using it properly.
What sort of activities were you,
I did every sport there was,
okay,
from like soccer, football, baseball, softball,
so mainly sport things.
and then I was in Boy Scouts, Cub Scouts, most school programs that was involved as well. But yeah.
Okay. All right, other diverse components, social support. So how well does the parent have a good social support in their family, their friends, church, neighborhood, all that, school? You know, are they being supported in what they do? Culture in general, their general worldview toward parenting, whether they see it as positive, negative, whether they see themselves as Christians that are trying to grow children to serve God, and birth order as well. So the parents' birth order and how it affects how they were raised and how they perceive things, and then it changes how they parent. All right, the child's contribution to the parenting style. So the parent could have a style, but the child could also influence that style. So the child influences the style through their age, maybe how old they are, their gender, whether it's a boy or a girl. So a parent might parent a boy differently than they would a girl. With their appearance, for good or for bad. So if they have a certain look that's good or negative, positive or negative, it could have an effect. If there's a disability involved. Temperament, so are they compliant or are they not compliant? Personality and responsiveness, so how they respond to you as a parent all play a part in that bonding process with each other. All right, gender and parenting style. So everybody knows you need a mom and a dad. All right, so one of the big arguments that I think that we could make for kids needing a mom and dad, and how couples that are same-sex couples who are trying to adopt children, their children tend to miss out on certain characteristics of being raised by a male or a female parent. So we know that mothers in general encourage intimacy, so they're into emotional connecting, nurturing, bonding, and then the fathers teach more like self-reliance, the push, the go. You know, if you think of when you have who's the one that throws the kid up in the air? The dad. All right, so the dad is the boundary pusher, like quite literally. You don't see many moms throwing up kids into the air. Like my husband will wrestle with Alethea. I don't do much wrestling with my granddaughter, but he will. So there's that pushing thing. And so the moms tend to be like, if a kid doesn't feel well, they're like, oh, you'll be okay. The dad might push them some more. All right, they might be the ones that are, keep going, you gotta do this. And if you don't have both of those characteristics, then you end up missing an element. A kid isn't pushed a certain way, or a kid isn't nurtured the way they should be. All right, parents often disagree on style of how to parent, but they shouldn't do it in front of the child, all right? No couple does this perfectly, but I think it's the goal of most couples to try to be a united front as parents. All right, to present to the child that you should do it this way. All right, and sometimes you will disagree with your spouse on the way things are going. In fact, it happens a lot in parenting. And so you probably just have to step back, not get offended by it. I recall many times being upset about this particular thing. Just disagreeing with what my husband thought about maybe a decision I made about what I did or chose to do with one of the kids. All right, so just try to be a united front. All right, any thoughts here? All right, Jeanette, let's have you do your presentation.
You could be a united front.
So cool.
That's right, that's what you gotta do.
You can back them up.
And then talk about
I'm
it
like
later.
shivering.
Yeah.
I can't help it. Okay. Anywho, I did a devotional,
Hey,
4-day devotional on singleness. Yes.
oh, come on, somebody.
Okay. So day 1, I did just like the basis of what singleness is. So I talked about how a lot of people look at it as the in-between and how it's like the wait until you find someone new. But it's actually a gift that God's given you to like grow in yourself and to find out who you are and what your relationship with God really is. And sometimes it's hard in your singleness because people around you are very like involved and they like to add their input and their opinions and
Are you kidding me?
What?
But I basically just talked about how singleness is a gift, and a lot of people overlook that gift, and they always look for like what's next in my life and how will I move on to this next season. And sometimes it's okay to just wait in that season and allow God to bring growth in you that you can't really get when you're in a relationship. Just personal growth and to find out who you really are. And then I had 3 verses, Jeremiah 33:3, call to me and I will answer you and will tell you great and hidden things that you don't know. Jeremiah 29:11 through 13, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for welfare, not for evil, to give you a future and hope. Then you will call upon me and come and pray to me, and I will hear you. You will seek me and find me, and when you seek me with all of your heart. And then 1 Corinthians 7:8, to the unmarried and to the widows, I say that it is good for them to remain single as I am. And then day 2, I talked about past hurt and how sometimes singleness can be the effect of hurt, but we serve a God who can mend the brokenness. And throughout your time of being single, you can grow in God and lean on Him, and He can heal you from past hurt, past trauma, and He can help you try to find your wholeness, because sometimes when you're when you're hurt, you can be like broken, and then it's unhealthy to even think about getting in a relationship.
Is this like relational hurt you're talking about?
Relational hurt and just regular hurt, because sometimes regular hurt that has nothing to do with a relationship can still affect a relationship. Because if you don't know what you're going through and you don't know how to process that hurt, going into this new relationship, you're going to be like trauma dumping in a sense, because you're trying to process this experience.
Right.
And they don't necessarily deserve that. Not that they're there for you in your hurt, but like there's like a balance. And if you don't know where you're hurting or why you're hurting, it's not healthy. And I added more verses. I probably won't read all the verses because I have a lot for each one.
Well, pick the ones that make you excited.
Well, I did Ezekiel 36:26, which is, and I will give you a new heart and a new spirit I will put within you. And I will remove the heart of stone from your flesh and give you a heart of flesh. And then day 3, I talked about joy and how sometimes a lot of the time as people, like it's just in our nature, we search for joy in people.
Right.
And sometimes you can feel like very sad, very depressed if you're single and alone because you feel like you can't find that genuine joy that you get from being in a relationship or you get from people. I just talked about how God is the source of joy, like the ultimate source of joy. He is the main, like that is where you get your joy. And I talked about how God willingly gives it and how he wants to be a part of your life, even when you find yourself in a relationship, like in your season of singleness, to find that he is your source of joy, to then when you flow in, you still have that constant state of joy. And all of my verses are very similar. I'll just do 1 Peter 1:6-7. In this you rejoice, though now for a little while, if necessary, you have been grieved by various trials, so that the test the genuineness of your faith, more precious than gold that perishes though it's tested by fire, may be found to result in praise and glory and honor at the revelation of Jesus Christ. And then day 4, which is the last day, I just did how to live. Because I feel like there's kind of a thought when you're single that you can't really start your life until you get that person, and you can start your life once you're married. And especially as Christians at a Christian college, sometimes it's hard to think, well, I can't go do this ministry, I can't go do this thing if I'm not like in this relationship yet. And yeah, I just put waiting for your life partner shouldn't put your life on hold. You should like lean on God, find your relationship with God, find your relationship with the Lord and how you actually work in knowing him, but also what do you want to do with your life? Like start your life, find the things that you want to learn, that you want to grow in, what your desires are, what adventures you want to have. Make the decision to live your life to the fullest. And once you start living and once you start finding who you genuinely are as yourself, like your own person, then when someone new comes in, they're not going to derail you. It's not going to make your entire life change. You already know who you are, and they can join into your life, and you can join into theirs. But you have to have your own person. Otherwise, you're kind of alone and sad. And I did Ecclesiastes 3:1 and 11. And that's for everything there's a season and a time for every matter under heaven. And then 11 is, he has made everything beautiful in its time. Also, he has put eternity into man's heart. It's so that he cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. Yeah, I just did a little know who you are, know who God is. And you're not like alone and sad. It's hard to summarize it,
As you were talking, I was trying to think back to how I felt when I was single. It's been a long time.
Right.
Hopefully I don't have to be single in the future for very long. Oh. All right. What's up?
Like when you're, yeah, that's another level.
All right, there's ethnic variations in parenting style too. So different cultures hold different expectations for children. Can we come up with some examples of some ethnic variations that you can think of about having different expectations for kids in different cultures? This could be within the U.S. or outside the U.S.
I don't know.
Nobody can think of any? Have you guys, a lot of you have been overseas. Yeah.
You talked about how Koreans are a lot more aggressive with their children if they're
Yes.
not,
Whack them in the head.
and that's because they're not meeting their horribly high expectations for them.
Yes. Yeah, so in Korean culture and Asian culture in general, there's a high expectations for education, really learning a lot. There's huge pressure to get into a good college in Korea. There's very few good colleges, so the pressures to get into that, and the thought is if you don't get into a college, you're not gonna get a career, and you're not gonna be able to afford to actually live and make, you know, the decisions of having a family and having children, because so kids are pushed from a very young age to have careers that are basically your, doctor, lawyer. They're not really given visions for other things. When we went to Korea, we went to a Christian school where they literally teach these kids to not follow the whole system of the world in Korea, of having this high sense of pressure, where they're taught to explore things that interest them, their dreams, not necessarily pursue things that are what the world says that they should do. All right, any other examples? What do you think?
I mean, you already said like Asian culture, but when I was in the Philippines, kids were kind of expected to take care of themselves. Like,
Okay.
as soon as they're old enough to walk and talk, they
So more self-care,
they kind of just do what they do. They
Right.
don't buy food.
so
they
less
just-
direction from parents to do a lot of stuff. So that can lead to more independence probably, but maybe also dangerous situations
Very.
and, I don't know, neglect in some ways, but there's probably positives to it as well. What do you think, Kinsey?
So I don't know if this has to do with like a specific part of China, but I just know about this because my parents adopted my sister from there.
Okay,
But apparently they really like to wrap the babies up to really, really tight.
wrapping them up tight.
Yeah, for example, my sister, it was a really hot day. My parents didn't have her all bundled up.
So how old would she have been?
She was just a baby.
So little.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so the mom started pinching her skin because they were saying that she was getting too cold.
Okay. We do wrap babies in the US, but it's not seen as, it's usually right at birth. Maybe this goes longer, who knows? But it's usually at birth because a kid is kind of tucked in there pretty tight. And they are used to it. Sometimes they're content by it. But what I've seen in just taking care of babies is some babies love it and others don't. Others want freedom, hands out, feet out. And then others cry if they're not really bound up really tight. So it can be comforting, actually, to a kid. All right, any other cultural variations that you can think of? No? All right, family variations. So single-parent homes. So in general, single-parent homes don't do as well than when you have two parents. They're more likely to be, the kids are more likely to be suspended from school. Doesn't mean obviously that they all are. Become delinquent, suffer from abuse, take drugs, have repeated chronic physical conditions. So as far as repeated chronic physical conditions go, people that have traumatic upbringings generally have more physical problems. All right, so more symptoms, like literally not being cared for well has a physical consequence to it. And it can also be, emotionally connected. All right, and mental health issues. All right, gay or lesbian parents, long-term effects not fully known. We're kind of getting to the point where we're starting to see way more gay and lesbian parent things. And what do you think are some of the things that are coming about? What are some of the long-term effects coming out of these sort of couples and children? What are you seeing? What do you think, Dennis?
My very first girlfriend, her parents were gay.
Okay,
This is before I was a Christian, right?
these are guys,
Uh,
girls, or
ladies.
what are they?
They're
Two
lesbians.
ladies, okay.
And
And it was a girl,
yeah, it was
we're
one-
talking about a girl,
yeah,
okay.
So she was raised with gay parents,
Right,
which made her brother extremely unopen, and he was shut off to the world. Like he was going through something, he never opened up and involved it in, which led him to drinking.
okay,
Whereas for her, she opened up to men and found validation through them, which led her to have a kid.
okay, so they both ended up with some serious
And-
emotional issues.
Yeah, and I think that when it comes to gay relationships, despite the intentions behind those two people,
Right.
it still affects the kid negatively,
Yeah.
you know?
We could say the biggest negative consequence is probably through the spiritual example in the first place. And that they're not obviously following God's created order, and it doesn't lead them towards God. All right, Lindsay, what do you think?
One of my friend's parents, I saw like they kind of like focused on each other, and there wasn't much contact with the dad, and so the kids were kind of like left unchecked. They
Okay.
just went and did
So it's like
whatever.
neglect, sort of,
Kind of.
not really interested in the children. There could be all sorts of scenarios, really, where the kids are brought up with a lot of care. But you're still missing, when you're missing a mom or you're missing a dad, God created men and women with certain characteristics that help them parent children. And when one of those things is missing, it has a harmful effect on the child. There's no going around it. And you see that in single parent homes as well, if one of the parents is absent.
I was just
Like
gonna
missing out a dad or missing a mom.
I was just gonna say that.
Yeah.
What happened for me was when I
Missing
came,
a dad?
yeah, whenever I came back to North Dakota and my grandparents divorced, it pushed me away from the house. Like, I didn't want to be home. So
Okay.
like, when one parent leaves, it direct affected me, like, I don't want to
Right.
be here. You know?
All right, what do you think?
So for the detriments of having a single parent home,
Yeah.
is that shown more of like, you know, if it's only a mom in the home or only a dad, like, is there one that's worse than the other? Like statistically, is it just kind of generally the same?
I don't know statistically about the outcomes in particular. I mean, what would you guys think? Anybody?
I think it just depends on their habits and like what they're.
The type of parent?
Yeah, like what they're gonna put their kids through, whether they're more strict or less strict.
Right.
Involved in more work or less work.
And obviously, children that come from single-parent homes can be very well-adjusted people.
Amen.
You know, you can learn these skills, you can recover from it, and it's not, it just means that you're more likely to suffer these problems. But all of these problems can occur in a great home too. But it's just more likely to happen. Any other thoughts on this part? Yeah.
So does that also like apply to like a parent that's not married or anything, like adopting a child?
Yeah, I would say so. It's a similar situation. That's becoming way more common. Adopting children and also doing IVF by yourself. You know, not even adopting one, but doing IVF through like sperm donation or something like that, where people try to parent on their own. Some people do, what do you think about foster care with a single person? I mean, that one's tough. Yeah.
We had a mom at my church. She was single, no boyfriend, not married or anything. And she adopted 2 kids out of foster care.
Right.
And just knowing it was really hard for her, and then her kids were pretty crazy.
Yes. It's a
she
hard,
was
hard
struggling,
job.
and the kids were struggling. And
Yeah.
so that's a small experience, obviously.
Right. Yeah, it does seem as though taking in foster children and adopting foster children by 2 very stable people is a very hard thing to do. To do it by yourself is even more difficult, but there is, a crisis of not enough kids being cared for. My oldest son and his wife have done foster care in Rapid City, and some of the kids that they've taken have actually been placed in 24-hour daycare centers, where they're left literally in daycare 24 hours a day by the social services, awaiting foster care. So there's a real crisis of not even having a single home to even put these kids in the first place. So it's not an ideal. I would say it's not hard, but it's broken.
Yep.
And so I don't know, maybe trying to undo some brokenness can be a good decision for somebody to take it on their own. That's kind of what I think. Any other thoughts on that?
Thank Jesus.
Yeah, it's a hard thing.
I feel like with those kinds of things, they should partner with people in the community, because my family and I experienced, something happened and one of our friends, her kids got taken, but they were like, hey, it's being given to elderly family, but we'll pay you guys to watch the kids because they need like help because
A
they're
bit more help
older.
doing
Yeah.
it, okay.
So I wonder if there could be something in place, at least for like providing people in the community.
Some sort of supplement to
Yeah.
help certain people, yeah. I mean, that's something that churches could offer, you could say. You know, it could be a goal if someone had a desire to, you know,
At least
see that.
childcare.
Yeah, like, I think like Rapid City is just a terrible place for foster care. They do have huge support things there, and the churches are very active in it there, more so than, you know, you'd see out here. Did any of you have foster kids in your home? So just one? Okay. Was it a positive or a negative thing for you as a child?
Depends on the kid,
Depends on the kid.
and like how much care like they needed personally from my parents or something, or like how much.
Yeah.
Cause like there was times when a kid was brought in and they needed like a ton of care, and sometimes it was like I kind of got put on like the back burner.
Right.
Or sometimes when it was just like a really cool relationship, and it was just like me having just another sibling.
What did you think? You had one too?
Currently before I came here to college, they're technically our cousins, but we have them
Okay,
in foster
yeah.
care. But we already have like quite a few kids in our home, and so to me it was another responsibility because I already helped take care of my
Right.
siblings. But it was also great because then we just gotta pour love onto them and then, you know, take them to our church and stuff, so.
So I kind of personally I am very concerned about families that have their own children that take in foster kids, because I do think that it can be hard on the kids. You know, and I don't know what you do about that, because somebody needs to take care of these foster kids, but I do think that it's better if you don't have your own children, because it does put a burden on them. Those children need to be cared for, but you know, there's no perfect world and perfect solution to it all, but I would just caution against it, to care for the ones that you have, you know, and make that a real priority. All right, parenting the adolescent. So adolescence is a time of coming to know who we are and how we fit into society. So just figuring out life. Time of exploring identity in the area of politics. How many of you were into politics as adolescents? So some of you. Occupation, what you want to do for a job. I feel like the older I get and the more I ask younger people about what they want to do in high school, the less they know than they used to in the past. Like, people are more ambivalent about making decisions for their future. Like, even like they're in their senior year and it's like, what are you doing next year? I have no idea. There's like so many people like that. Yeah. Whereas in the past, I feel like, you know, people made these decisions maybe at a younger age, and maybe they were supported more in it, or there's something about, there's a lack of confidence about adolescents choosing their future. Exploring your identity in the area of religion. So basically a lot of, you know, it's a time when a lot of you guys, and I became a Christian when I was 17, but it's a time where your faith really becomes your own. Relationships, friendships, gender roles, so how you are supposed to act with the other sex, who you are, and what you're supposed to do. It's usually a time of contention between parents and adolescents. There's lower levels of problem behavior that are found in authoritative and authoritarian homes, all right? So those are the homes that had the more expectations. So if there's more rules, there seems to be, in general, less behavior problems. Those raised in indulgent families, so the ones that had lower rules, they tend to have higher levels of competence and work orientation. So they tend to be confident, happy, make friends, but they don't always respond well to when things don't go their way. Like they don't know how to handle the negative side of life. All right, they have significantly fewer psychological difficulties. Indulgent and neglectful homes had more behavior problems in general. So homes where there's not good emotional connection. You end up with more behavior problems and don't do as well in school and gen. So these are just generalities about these different groups. All right, stress and abuse. All right, physical changes in the brain take place as a result of nurturing and attachment. So when kids are well attached from the time that they're babies, they have a less of a heightened stress response. All right, so a kid that is under a lot of stress from infancy, they tend to, as they get older, they have more anxiety issues. All right, so their physical bodies and their brains have not developed in a way that has allowed them to cope with stress as well as a child that is in a nurturing sort of environment. All right, so the higher the stress, the worse it usually is. 90% of the time, so as far as abuse goes, it's by someone the child knows in the first place. So a family friend. And abuse is seen higher in poorer families. Why do you think it's higher in poorer families?
Parents are stressed.
Parental stress. Could be a lack of emotional connection. You know, they say money doesn't buy happiness, but money does lower stress and stress levels. All right, so when needs are met financially, there generally is less stress put upon parents and then children as well. So it's not necessarily about happiness, but the stress part of it. All right, certain parental characteristics that are common for parents that are involved in abuse with children. Basically a negative attitude in general. All right, so they might be angry, have angry issues. Unrealistic expectations of what they think the child should be or could do. Or maybe it's too high and they don't like the standard that the kid is at. A lack of knowledge in general. So this is where even intelligence level and education come to play. Just a lack of knowledge of normal child behavior. All right, so there's a difference between children that do things out of childishness as opposed to disobedience. So children can behave foolishly just because they're young. That doesn't necessarily mean it's disobedience. So sometimes it's hard for people to distinguish between someone being childish or fully disobedient. The attitudes before birth, an unwanted sort of pregnancy. I know that, my mom had me before she was married, and my dad, his family just decided that they were gonna hate my mother. And that sort of attitude, I think, towards the fact that she was pregnant and then they got married, I feel like it affected his relationship for me from the very beginning. Because his family was negative towards him and towards my mom, and I think it had a negative effect on me. And then my parents got married when I was older, and then they had my brother, and it seemed as though he was able to relate to my brother better than he was to me. And then for the rest of my life, my grandparents always, my dad's parents always it always seemed like it was a bit of a blockade there. because of it. And unwanted pregnancies back in the 1970s, and my dad grew up in a very strict Catholic family, went to a Catholic school. That was a big deal, a huge deal to have a kid out of wedlock compared to now. All right, anger, anxiety issues themselves, so they might have some mental health issues. Marital problems, so stress in the relationship. Unemployment is huge. How many of you guys have had parents that have been unemployed? And that stresses the family out. A difficult child. All right, so we're seeing a lot of, there's a huge rise in, what is the difficult children thing? I'm blanking out. Like ADHD issues now, where it's becoming way more common to see that. More children suffering from that. All right, let's have Zach. You're up.
Okay.
What are you doing?
I did a book report on the book From Me to We. Let me grab
Me
it
to
out of
We.
here real quick.
We to me. All right, go backwards.
There's a book Ariana wanted me to read, so I decided to do a report on it too. It's by Lucille Williams. She's been married for 25 years and also has been doing marriage counseling for 25-ish years as well. She just talks about her experiences and things that she wished she knew before she was going into marriage. One important thing that she talked about was the idea that your feelings can lie to yourself. So you tend to act out of your feelings without questioning your partner. So you believe just because they're not energetic when they come home, they don't love you anymore. When that's not true, it's just they're tired and want to sleep. Then she points out, they love you because they came back home. Then you should be trying to believe the truth instead of believing your feelings.
Okay, that's good.
Mm-hmm. Another thing she talked about a lot was forgiveness and bitterness being a foothold for the devil, which is something we've talked about a lot already. And then communication was also a main chapter that I covered as well. But yeah.
All right. All right, 10 principles for parenting effectively. All right, first one, be consistent. All right, the parent tells the child to do something and the child must comply. So the first time obedience concept. All right, this should be done without yelling, complaining, or ignoring non-compliance. So without yelling. So have you guys ever had the I don't know, screaming parent or screaming teacher? I mean, there's always a screaming teacher in the public school, right? And what do people do to the people that scream all the time? You don't even listen to them. It's just like it doesn't even matter that they're screaming their heads off. Or the coach. You know, the coach that just yells and yells and yells. It's just like whatever. It doesn't even matter. So it doesn't make you more effective. All right? Being calm and confident is what makes you more effective. Not yelling about it. Not complaining. And not ignoring non-compliance. So you have to make a choice. It's annoying at times to address problems. You don't always want to confront things, come up with what the punishment's going to be. All right, hold fast to the consequences is principle 2. So children must face consequences for misbehavior and know what the consequences are. All right, so you're going to see to it that discipline's done and that it's clear as to what it's going to be, like what the expectations are and what happens if you don't comply. All right, so you can do things like if you're going somewhere and you have a certain expectation that you want your children to, let's say you're going to church, and you say, while we're at church, you can color quietly, play with this, but you're not going to be like running around. All right? And if you run around, the consequence for running around is you're not going to be able to, I don't know, whatever they're not going to be able to do. Watch TV when you get home. Okay? So you make it clear before you go. You could say, because if you've seen this as a problem in behavior in the past, you say, you need to do this, and if you don't do this, this is the result.
You gotta follow one.
You have to follow up, yeah. All right, principle 3, allow choices, all right? But the choices in life that you allow your children to make are dependent on the age that they're at. All right, so it should be consistent with age and guiding the child to make the right choices. So it could be something, you start with choices when kids are little, but this is what you don't do. How many of you know, like, when you go to a grocery store and you go to, say, the cereal aisle and there's 9,000 boxes of cereal, it kind of just leaves you going to the same old box that you usually get because there's just so much stuff. So having too many choices for a child is very overwhelming. All right, so if you choose to, you know what, we're going to be able to have a choice where you can choose to choose this dress or that dress. That would be an age-appropriate thing. To tell a child, you can just take anything you want, figure that out. It's overwhelming. It stresses them out. So limit choices. So just like if we don't like it, children get overwhelmed by it even more. All right, so some simple things could be like choosing how to dress, maybe at times choosing meal options if it's appropriate. You know, in general, you don't, you choose what you want to make, but if you have a realm where you want to make certain decisions where it can be flexible, you can choose things there, but you're not leaving tons of options. All right, and then as kids get older, you give them more choice and more freedoms as time goes on. All right, principle 4, define expectations. Children need to know how to behave. We already talked about that one. Tailor the discipline to fit the offense. All right, so there shouldn't be some crazy discipline for a minor infraction. It's got to match it. And for the opposite, for something major, having a consequence that doesn't really do anything or change anything. All right, we talked about natural consequences, how usually that's best because people do learn from that. Consequences have to have a negative effect. All right, do not threaten. So parents shouldn't threaten to do something they can't or won't do, so don't bluff. Say what you say, stick to your guns on it. All right? Don't change your mind or bluff and say something that you have no intention of doing. So like you're driving to Disney World and you say, if you misbehave in the back of that vehicle, we're not going to Disney World. And you have no intentions to not go to Disney World. You know, so don't bluff and say something that you don't mean. Mean it. So think about, instead of it being a threat, you have to come up with real consequences. All right, principle 7, remain calm. So don't continually use a loud voice or it'll get tuned out. Number 8, remember that they are children in the first place, that kids are kids. All right, and that's a good thing. Set realistic expectations for that age. It's supposed to be a time when they're learning from mistakes. All right, so you're very gracious about it. 9 is establishing curfews for older children. How many of you had curfews growing up? All right, so curfew is a good boundary where you're allowing freedom that's age appropriate to what's good for the kid. Number 10, know your children's friends and their friends' parents. All right, so Paige gave us a lot of advice in this area. All right, parenting and the attributes of God. All right, we can raise our children to choose to serve God, but in the end, they're the ones that make the choice. All right, so your worst nightmare, the thing you probably, would break your heart more than anything is to have a child that doesn't serve God. There's no greater hurt than that. All right, so as you do your ministry to people that have children that aren't serving God, realize that this is a deep, deep hurt for people. Like the spiritual well-being of our children and the decisions that they make. And a lot of parents, they feel as though it's their fault. They might blame God for it, or they might accept it, but however it is, it's a deeply painful thing. Remember that children are like a loan from God for a short time. All right, so we are, what's the word to use for that? I can't think what the word is. I'm thinking it starts with an R, but maybe not. But basically, they're on loan from God. They don't belong to us. But they're given to us by God to help them grow towards God. All right, so they ultimately belong to God. So that's where we need to place, our fear. You'll have fear as a parent. You'll be afraid for their spiritual lives. You'll be afraid for their physical, are they going to survive? There's so many fears involved. And one of the ways to combat the fears is to remember this concept, that ultimately they belong to God, and I am just the person that God's put into their lives to try to help guide them along the way. And it's very freeing to think that way. When you don't have to think that it's all about you caring for. God is ultimately the parent to that child. And that's a really nice thing to keep in mind. All right, God is life. So humans are created in the image of God. So children are created into the image of God and are a gift to parents. Another attribute of God. God is loving. So it describes the very nature of God. We are to love as He does and train our children to. And if we love them, we discipline them. So just as God disciplines us because He loves us, we discipline our children because we love them. It's mirroring the way God treats us. God is faithful. So when parents are stable, we can resemble the faithfulness of God and how He's a faithful to us. And if parents are unstable, then it can lead children with a view of God, is He going to really take care of me? So there's less security in that relationship. All right, God is patient. So it's a display of His mercy. So parents are tested in the area of patience and developing. It's an area that it helps you to develop patience in, dealing with kids in general. But when they're your own kids, it's hard too. God is forgiving, so parents are called to model this to their children. All right, so this would be, as a parent, when you make a mistake, you can say to the kid, I did this wrong. Would you please forgive me? Right? And then when the kid does something wrong, you teach them how to ask the other person for forgiveness. And frequently what do kids say? They'll say that they forgive you, but sometimes before they're ready to even say they're sorry, they're like, but they did this to me.
Yeah.
There's always these arguments back and forth. They see if there's some sort of mass violation, then their forgiveness can't be involved. So it's an opportunity to teach that we have to forgive no matter what happens. All right, not bring up past mistakes. All right, so we model that by not bringing up the faults that they might have done in the past. God is personal. So we have to model that He desires an authentic relationship. So just as we have a relationship with our children, we teach them to have a relationship with us and then with God. All right, so parenting is all about balancing the two concepts of nurture and control. So the lovingness and the demandingness thing, or having the rules. So high love, high rules. And when we balance those well, we tend to get the best outcome. So a balance between expectations and consequences, between discipline and mercy. Right? So it's keeping them in a good view and not weighing more on one side than the other. All right, so this mostly resembles the authoritative parenting style. So that's what most of you feel like you came from. All right, any thoughts on that? All right, we're done with this one. All right, we're done for the day then.
Okay.
All right, have a good day, stay warm.